The UN Human Rights Office says violations committed by Sudan's Rapid Support Forces during the capture of the city of al-Fashir may amount to war crimes and possible crimes against humanity. The findings are based on interviews with more than 140 victims and witnesses and document over 6,000 killings in just the first 3 days of the offensive. Joining us now from Nairobi is Seif Magango, who is spokesperson for the UN Human Rights Office, to unpack. Seif, thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. First, what is the UN Human Rights Office most concerned about in terms of what happened in al-Fashir?
Well, we are concerned about this pattern of human rights violations and violations of international human rights law in Sudan, in al-Fashir, but also across the Sudan. Almost 3 years now since the conflict began in that country. What we documented in al-Fashir in the past few days of the fight to capture al-Fashir by the Rapid Support Forces, there was absolute carnage. The killings that took place absolutely confound and assault the conscience of humanity. For 6,000 people to be killed in a matter of 3 days indicates a systematic pattern of wanton killing and violating human rights and people's lives and killing them for politics, on ethnic grounds, and that's absolutely uncalled for. And this is a repeat of a pattern we've seen in attacks by the RSF when they take over different towns from Ardamata to Al-Geneina. And now, as they've moved into Kordofan, there are fears that these violations that we documented might recur. And that's something that we're warning the world to do everything possible to prevent.
What constitutes war crimes and crimes against humanity? Can you describe it in practical terms for our listeners to understand when a situation becomes classified as one of these? You mentioned figures. Is it about the number of people? Is it about people being killed along ethnic lines? How do we practically explain it?
Well, you remember, and your viewers will perhaps remember this, that for 18 months since until the capture of al-Fashir, the city was under siege for a whole 18 months. People were eating animal feed and unable to access the basics of life, water, shelter, and many of the people of Darfur had been displaced into the camps of Zamzam and Ashuk and other places. And there was a massive attack on Zamzam camp that also killed hundreds upon hundreds of people. Now, when the attack on al-Fashir, the city to take it over, happened, again, these killings took place. You ask about what a war crime is. A war crime is, that would be, as our report says, the acts that were carried out by the Rapid Support Forces could constitute the war crime of murder, many other war crimes. I'll look for the exact phrase that was used, that there are reasonable grounds to believe that the RSF and affiliated Arab militia committed acts amounting to the war crime of murder, intentionally directing attacks against civilians and civilian objects, launching indiscriminate attacks, use of starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, attacks directed against medical and humanitarian personnel, infliction of sexual violence, including rape, torture, and other cruel treatment, acts of pillage, and the conscription and enlistment and use of children in hostilities. And when these are war crimes, crimes against civilians in a situation of armed conflict, when these such acts are committed as part of a sustained systematic attack on a civilian population, then they could amount to crimes against humanity.
So, as you mentioned before, 6,000 killings were documented by your team. How were you able to verify these figures under such difficult situations that you face there?
Yeah, indeed, that's a very good question. We spoke to many victims and witnesses who told us that they saw dozens upon dozens of people killed, bodies strewn on the road from al-Fashir to Tawila, and many of them gave consistent numbers in different locations of people killed in the dozens, in the hundreds. So through our methodology, we're able to deduce that the number that were killed in those 3 days was more than 6,000. But not to forget that this number is not definitive as the total of number of people killed in that campaign. It is entirely possible, and I think it is certainly the case that the number that we have published of 6,000 is only the tip of the iceberg. There are other statistics that point to very high numbers, and from the pattern of attacks and the number of people killed in other situations, it is normal, almost normal now that when they take over a town, they kill people in very large numbers. So we cannot verify 100% that the number of people killed, but it is deeply concerning that in only 3 days, 6,000 people were killed. And that's why we're basically calling for investigations by, including by the ICC, which has already assessed that war crimes may have taken place in al-Fashir, and to hold those people responsible to account, including those in command positions.
Yeah, it is definitely concerning, this type of violence. But what does it also tell us about the way in which the rapid support forces are operating, particularly in Darfur, this type of violence you're seeing?
Well, it points to a campaign of ethnically based attacks and targeting of those considered to be non-Arabs in that part of Sudan, and it echoes patterns in the past, including the acts of the Janjaweed in the early 2000s in that region. We consistently seeing attacks by people, by Arab allies and fighters of the RSF, attacking people who look like you and me, of the Zagawa community in that region. A pattern that has also been repeated multiple times in the current conflict, which started in April 2023. We saw this happen in a number of situations where where the RSF have taken over a town, the carnage that happens during that period. And really, we can talk about all these repetitions of the violations, but the point to underline here is that there has to be an end to this conflict. People have suffered enough. 3 years of incessant fighting. It needs to be it. The conflict needs to end today, not tomorrow. There has to be accountability.
And what is the message that the UN Human Rights Office is sending to the victims? What would you like them to know, the victims and survivors in al-Fashir, who may feel like the world has moved on from them?
Well, as you know, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, was recently in Sudan just a couple of weeks ago, and he visited the IDP camp al-Afad, which is in northern state. And he also had meetings with civil society groups and other interlocutors to hear from them directly and to tell them that the world is watching and the world is listening and the world is advocating. And we, as the United Nations, are pushing all states with influence on the situation to take action and stop the fighting. The High Commissioner has repeatedly been calling for accountability for these human rights violations, not only within the Sudanese context, but also the international fora and also under universal jurisdiction, but also for a ceasefire to be agreed and implemented, leading to a peaceful settlement of the conflict, because there can be no military solution to this crisis. Otherwise, it would have been found. And then there's
Seif, we'll leave it there for now, and thanks again for your insights.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
It's Seif Magango, spokesperson for the UN Human Rights Office, joining us live from Nairobi, giving us the latest there in terms of the UN's findings on alleged Rapid Support Forces violations in al-Fashir, that is in Sudan.